thank you for coming along to our panel on how to close the open source skills gap. So my name is Clare, you probably told me earlier. I am going to very quickly ask the panelists to introduce themselves and their perspective on the open source skills gap as an opener, if that's all right. I think we'll save time. We've only got, 40 minutes to get through this topic. So Daniel, do you want to start?
Hello, friends. Daniel Ruggeri. I'm a distinguished engineer at Mastercard, but also a long-time open source evangelist. And my background on open source skills gap is, well, I'll give you a call to action later that explains it. It starts with you. That's the quick version.
Oh, now you're in trouble. We've already got actions. We haven't even started the opening. Go on, Dave. The open
team. So Dave Feenan, director at the technology journal at Skillnet, probably the least person in the room. Never mind on the panel.
Oh, they haven't got to me yet.
I was just robbing your line before you. Yeah, we're funded by the Irish government to assist companies in Ireland to upscale. Take on open source, which you talk about is technical skills, the software skills, architecture skills, and to Claire's earlier point about building roads and bridges. The transversal piece is the soft skills. We can't lose sight of those.
Thanks, Dave.
My name is Steve Walli. I work for Microsoft, but my night job is I teach software engineering around open source skills development at Carnegie Mellon University. I like what he was saying about soft skills. Software engineering is all about the soft skills, and so that's what we're trying to force. But the harder part for me, that gap, is everybody thinks it's about the software. They don't understand that it's actually about all the maintenance in the roads and bridges kind of way that everybody keeps talking about it. It is about sustainability and maintenance.
So just to before we come to you, Lee, so excuse me, the windows, there's a switch on the wall somewhere. You can't do it from the windows themselves, but if you can close them up for the noise, that'd be fantastic. And maybe stick on the fans as well. This is getting warm too. So apologies about that, but we'll hopefully be able to sort that out. So apologies for interrupting the flow. Lee.
Hello everyone, my name is Lee. I'm a senior technical recruiter with NineDots. I'm usually the person that they parachute in when they realise that they haven't got the skill sets required in the team. So that's where I kind of jump in and help get your teams address certain topics.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you for bringing. So what we have, pulled together here are folks that are coming from the corporate world who have been involved in skills building with the academic sector. Folks involved in Ireland in actually, building the various different skills and figuring out how these skills can be built within the system of Ireland. And I think that what we want to cover today are just some of the practical learnings about how we're doing that, like what skills are we building, how are we building them, and indeed how are organizations actually figuring out like how to recruit them and build those skills within their companies as well. So it's a lot to cover. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of get some questions from the floor first of all. But I'm going to start with that question because we've started it about what kind of skills we think are needed, and maybe the intersection between some of the other topics that are kind of top of mind as well. But Daniel, I know this is a conversation that in the panel prep session we kind of segued into a much bigger conversation. But can you give a summary of where you think the skills are needed from both a corporate perspective and from the open source sector perspective?
Yeah, one of the things that I'll point out is the way we work in open source has become the way we work in industry. The whole peer review, pull requests, open development kind of model. We do that in a lot of our companies. It's become the mechanism by which we do it. So talking about the what and the how, I think that's where we could spend a lot of time. Do we need to teach people better software engineering? Yes, always. But how do I play well with others? What do these open source communities come to expect? Because that is the area where I think we as open source practitioners and lovers can help others learn. If you show up and you call back to our conversation yesterday, if you just show up and puke AI slop at an open source maintainer, they'll maybe politely, maybe not so politely give you the finger and ask you to try again. And we expect the same thing in our own organizations too. So those are some of the things that I think, the whole way of working, the ethos around open source can pervade into our corporate lives.
Thanks, Daniel. And I know, Stephen, you've been involved in these programs, trying to build these with undergraduates. Maybe have a talk about like the process of what makes it different when you're doing the open source work in there.
So the aha moment for me, it started, like I said, I work in Azure at Microsoft. And when I returned to Microsoft 8 years ago, I was seeing extraordinarily, in my opinion, stupid things happening in the engineering team. And this wasn't outbound kind of product. This was internal engineering systems. And we started, the manager I had at the time, he basically said, yeah, go investigate. So for 2 years, I taught out of Johns Hopkins University. And it was a regular semester-based course. The aha was if we could give students real software experience around dependencies and open source, because that's what all your dependency chain is now in the supply chain, that somehow we could find a way to give them better skills on the way out. And those 2 years, the second year I actually slid. There was 20 students in Baltimore. We slid another 20 from University of Galway on the backside of that quietly without telling anybody. And it was a great class. But the mentors and I knew this wasn't going to scale because the deep learning was every student had a project in an open source project with an industry mentor. That was their skilling up. But it didn't force the things we wanted, and the mentors and I all agreed that this wasn't going to scale. The following year, happy happenstance, I moved over to Carnegie Mellon and we turned it into a summer internship. And the real professor, remember I am a lowly paid instructor, the real professor who teaches software engineering said, we're going to force the students together in teams of 5. So I went back out to my community connections and found big pieces of work that a team of 5 students working 40 hours a week, not 80 hours over a semester with 4 other courses banging for their attention. What could they accomplish with 2 industry mentors on the backside? And it turns out they can accomplish amazing things. But again, it was that forced communications, back to the soft skills. You have to make your meeting. They were all of their grading came down to, okay, there was a weekly coaching meeting with us. They had 3 presentations through the semester of tell us what you're doing. And in each of them, everybody has to present. There's no give it to the one person that's kind of comfortable in front of a room. And the mentors they gave 2 checkpoints on were the students involved in the weekly meeting, were they doing good work kind of thing. And the last thing we did to them is we taught them about 360s in the last week. So we had them judge their teammates. And it was fascinating to watch that social dynamic. There was one team that had been trying to protect the one laggard for the whole course, and they finally threw him under the bus, deservedly so. And it was one of those things that these are undergraduates. They've never had that social experience before. But it was all about the soft skills all the time. And the layering of the course material on top. A third of the classes were me teaching about open source. But I don't teach about it as this wonderful thing that, rising tide floating all boats. I've been a product manager in this space for 30 to 35 years now. And, before we called it open source. And it's that understanding of how you actually use it to build product. And that it's not this scary thing, but it is, instead of build versus buy, which every engineer understands, there's a borrow and share in the middle. But it still comes with the same analysis of risk. And you have to understand that analysis of risk. So it's been a fun learning curve for me to go through, figuring out the pedagogy on the fly and having some great mentors step in. But that's the kind of skills building we're chasing. And we're trying to figure out, before AI tanks it all, how to help kind of next level go. So.
Thanks, Stephen. And I think, we've already heard some of the, I suppose, changes, therefore, that's coming at the corporate world in terms of thinking about how you deal with software engineering in the future. And Lee, from hearing about the kind of this idea of the internships, we were talking before as well about the kind of what this means in terms of trying to find the right skills for corporations. I mean, it's a harder job now because, if everyone has got a very similar fancy, if bland looking AI created CV, how can you figure out who are the right people to actually identify as potential candidates for a role? Like how are organizations handling that these days?
It's very interesting to listen to you guys here. I'll say we keep getting pushed at the moment for culture. Everyone keeps saying to us they need to just fit the culture. Like, we can find a set of skills, no problem. We can go off and do that. But the one thing that keeps coming back is like, they just have to get along with the culture. Makes a lot of sense now. For the soft skills, it's up to us to really just press people on how they go about things. And when we're doing like an intake call, we might be like, what are the questions you would like to know? If I send you over a candidate, how do they do X, Y, Z, how they handle X, Y, Z scenario, where we mostly like will dig into that on calls with people. When it comes to like with the AI side of things, with graduates, we at the moment I would say, for someone looking to get into it, we would be like, can you contribute to open source? Like, it doesn't matter, you don't have to do thousands of lines of code, but you might go along and do some documentation to show that, you want to be in the space, you're interested, you can analyze these complex problems and maybe give your own small contribution to the source, and showing that hiring managers that you are capable and interested in delving into that space, and I suppose showing that interest and having those skills really helps along when we're selling a candidate to a hiring manager, shall we say.
And I don't know if one of the things that I think has come up more broadly in conversations is this idea that perhaps we do need even more kind of internship programs like this because of a gap in corporations, like de-investing basically in junior roles and things like that. Are you seeing that in the market here in Ireland? Like, is there a reduction in opportunities for internships and things?
100%. I was at a meeting in LinkedIn maybe 3 weeks back, and it was a HR meeting, and like how agentic AI is changing how recruitment is done, and how LinkedIn's agentic AI is changing how recruitment is done. I put my hand up and I was like, what? Like, everyone's riding the wave of AI now, and that's great, but like, there's less jobs for our juniors. What happens in 5 years' time? Where do we get mid-levels? And the response I got was very like, we're all just riding the wave at the moment. There will be more jobs created in years. I was like, but that doesn't, people now, it doesn't help at all. So it seems like it does seem like there's 1 minute there's a severe lack of planning around, bringing juniors through, and then people who are just graduating and they're kind of at a loss because they're struggling to find an internship that they might have walked into in maybe 3 years ago.
So I was just talking to a young person in the hallway there, and it turned into 3 young people. And the question was, what was my advice? And so I'll give the room my same advice, because I think it speaks to the AI question right now. And this was advice given to me by my father, and it turned out to be right. So there was that idea. He basically said, when I was still new in career, he said, join something industry related, and then put your hand up and do something, get it done. That was it. And I was just aware enough of his early career that I watched him do that. And he's had an amazingly checkered career up until he was 75, still consulting kind of thing. And I tried it once, and it didn't really work out the first time, but the second time I tried it in a slightly different organization, I have never looked back. It has been every one of those opportunities you build. There's a paper out there by Granovetter that will tell you your loose network is where you find your jobs. But I fell into an industry standard. I was there for 10 years. That transferred into the Unix research community. I was there for about 10 years, which transferred into this broad open source community. So it's not like I was just in one of these networks. But the important part was you didn't sit in the room and listen. You have to put your hand up. So that's what we're doing with these students in these internships, these summer internships we're running. We're forcing them to do work in front of their seniors. And it's not just the 2 industry mentors, because I cannot do a Google Summer of Code cattle call. I have to be very specific. These are students in a university program. They paid money for the course, all the rest of it. They have to have a good outcome. So the focus on learning outcomes means that I'm very picky about the projects I bring up. But in all of those communities, it's their mentors kind of get them into the project, and as soon as they start turning pull requests in towards the end of the course, all of a sudden there's this community of people around them that they've never seen that start offering them commentaries. And the real kicker is this group are now their references going out into the real world. We've had folks, these are 3rd years going into 4th year. I've had mentors say, like, we'd be making job offers if they weren't going into 4th year, because you get that clean view of their ability to work in a team to accomplish something. They've done that. We've forced the moral equivalent. Put your hand up and do something, and be visible in our community as getting something done. And just how trivial that can be. My father, in the organization, it's a hardware engineering thing, not even in our industry, but close at all. It was the 70s. They used to have spouses programs at the annual conference. So for 2 years, he put up his hand and ran the spouses program. And the following year, he was assistant chair. And the following year after that, he was chair. So he was suddenly a 32-year-old engineer. And every engineer in the Southern Ontario basin knew who he was, that he got stuff done. He's never looked back. One of the questions from these young people was, have I hit the ageist problem? I've been laid off 3 times in 45 years, twice since I was 50. I've never been fearful because I always have a rich network of people around me that are actually keeping an eye out for me. So the AI thing, if I was still in the business, yes, I would have to learn more about AI, but it doesn't scare me. It's just another tool set. So.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you also for bringing in this whole idea that, because sometimes in the skills programs, we do focus on kind of undergraduate skills or younger people. But like, us older people can learn too. And, there's a challenge here for us all to get skills in this area.
Claire's going to need help for next year.
Yeah.
Put your hand up.
Yeah, put your hand up now. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And I want to kind of come to Dave on this. I also want to say that, thanks to ICT Skillnet, we actually did a skills report about the open source gap in Ireland. It's up on the Open Ireland Network website. And one of the really interesting things that I found for that, in fact, it was interesting to everyone I talked to in the open source industry, was almost the almost equal emphasis on the idea that there was a big technical gap. And this is some of what we've been talking about today. And that covers the soft skills within the technical scenario. But then there was also a corresponding gap in other types of disciplines like legal and sales and marketing. Like, these people are not technical at all. And what was happening was in organizations in Ireland, it was exacerbating the technical skill gap because they had to keep pulling technical people into the sales calls, into the marketing calls, because they didn't understand anything that was going on when people were working in this space. And so I suppose with that in mind, thinking about this being broader than just a skills gap that relates to technology, but also the broader ecosystem. Can you maybe talk to where you see the opportunities for building those skills, and particularly maybe not at the undergraduate level, but for continuous professional development?
So if I could engage our audience, just a show of hands, who in the room has a technology background?
You mean history or work?
Yeah. Who in the room only has a management or C-suite background with no technology background? So we've no decision makers in the room.
No, wow.
We've no budget owners, yeah? So the big gap is, if you look at cloud, like, it took a pandemic for cloud to be universally accepted. Yet, because many of us in the room are involved in early versions of cloud back in the previous century. I can say it now because we've rolled into a number of decades. But the challenge, and we've seen it as well in AI, is that the rush to embrace the technologies, leadership teams are lost. The business models are not structured around that agility of change, because the decision making now can affect the brand overnight. We used to talk in the old days, go back to the days of Microsoft, when they were a production, software production entity, and they had boxes of software with CDs and DVDs in it. If there was a warehouse fire, they might have got back on their feet, 12 months later. Today, digital world, you get it wrong, you could be burnt overnight and you never recover. So the big gap we're actually seeing is that senior leadership teams are lost. They are struggling with the demands, and we can talk about this, of expectation of people coming into the industry for the first time from the undergraduate programs, their entitlements, and maybe their inability as well to understand the true meaning of collaboration, rather than, what's in it for me, rather than paying forward as such, which this community is all about. But for the management piece, it would be that harmonization of understanding the return on investment, open source engagement within their organization can bring the business model. That is a big gap in skill sets here in Ireland. and right across the globe. So how do we close that gap? Like if you look out there, I'll mention here, like we don't have a open source apprenticeship. Yeah, if you just think about it, like can we get a group of individuals for maybe 3 or 6 months and sheep dip them? Yeah, it doesn't need to be 2 years. Yeah, it doesn't.
And they don't need to be students. They can.
Yeah. Well, you know more about than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and similar to yourself, 3 redundancies, 2 in the last 15 years. Yeah, it's life. So the necessity for people to reinvent themselves, there's expectation that the system will reinvent them. But what we need to do, and especially here in Ireland, because we're losing our competitiveness, we are very much on the extremities of Europe, like that bed and breakfast with the States and Europe, we sit in the middle of it. But we badly need to take a thought leadership position and to look at how best we can lead an open source momentum out of here that is not solely technology based. Like to Clare's earlier point around the skill sets on legal, like around privacy, there's an awful lot of that here within the legal industry, the professional service industry. And if you look at the IDA, that is one of the calling cards. The ecosystem in Ireland is here to help a company scale. But for ourselves, we feel that it's the management piece, the understanding by the decision makers, the budget owners, those that will allow budget to maybe sandbox something in open source, pet project over here, will allow for collaboration outside of the firewall because of all the cybersecurity scenarios. So there's a mindset shift needed, Clare, and how do we do that? And it's not about the money. I think it's more about smart initiatives to get people in to see what that gap is, what do we actually require, because that will lead to a much more enhanced environment for everybody.
Brilliant. No, thank you. And I suppose maybe very briefly, I'll just come to Daniel just to explain, because how we met was actually not to do with the skills program at all. We met in Mastercard about the work that's been happening in Mastercard Ireland. So before we go to the floor, I just want maybe if you can just briefly say about what's happening in Ireland in Mastercard around this, because this is a really interesting.
So we ended up creating like a community of knowledge and sharing in Mastercard. So one of the things that I did with a colleague, maybe it was 2015, so I guess it's not just a couple of years ago anymore. But we created a group and a process. We're very regulated in process industry for how to contribute and participate in open source. And we did this whole like inner grassroots thing. And it was great because there were a number of engineers who just simply didn't know much about open source. The way I got involved much more in Ireland is Gavin here is a big lover of open source. He's our Ireland country manager, and now all of Europe. Congratulations on the improvement. Creating these pockets of community, which it should sound very familiar to all of us participating in open source, because that's ultimately what drives a good open source project is a good open source community. So we're doing that. We're leaning into it. We're meeting up. We're talking about what are some of the projects out there that we can participate in. We help folks that they don't know what they want to do yet. They just want to do something, and we say, take a look at this patch. It's a nice low-hanging fruit. Great way to get involved. Great way to get that first open source dopamine hit. That's the type of thing that we aim for. We've got a couple of graybeards in the group that just look to mentor and guide other folks interested. And then, of course, we talk about history and all of that fun stuff, because we just can't talk about open source without some of the philosophy and, dare I say, religion of some of it.
Yeah, no, and I think we're all just learning about these ways in which that these practices in the open source community can be brought into organizations at not just the technology, but the practices as well. So I think that's a great thing. So we'll open up to questions from the floor. Maybe we have one already.
Yes, I'm Neil O'Reilly, and I'm missing 2 related topics in what's been discussed so far that I think are also important, and these are interoperability and transferability of skills. and they're related in a way that I'll explain, but hopefully briefly. Back in the day when I was a teenager, office automation hadn't happened. And if you were a clerical worker in an office, it didn't really matter whether your typewriter was branded Olivetti or Underwood. You came in, you knew how to type, you knew how to produce documents, you knew how to lay them out, you were aware of content and process independent of a particular vendor's solution. We still have that kind of transferability with driving. It doesn't matter whether you're driving a Volvo or a Toyota, you learn to drive.
Yeah.
You don't learn skills that are solution dependent.
Yeah.
And the interoperability then is, do we have a data format that will work equally well in this proprietary set of solutions or this open source set of solutions? And where the product exist already, we've been hearing a lot about development. And of course, that's crucial, but we haven't heard a lot about substitution with existing solutions to solve process problems that don't need new development.
Yeah.
They need people to dissociate their process from proprietary solutions. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking Google or Apple or Microsoft or whoever. We need to say, well, tomorrow, if there's some nice open source application that delivers me data at home, and I want to mangle it with LibreOffice, does it work? Does it even work?
It's a great point, and thank you for bringing that element to the whole question. I know we may not get into it right now, but it is a topic that's very commonly discussed in terms of, I suppose we were even talking about it in terms of this idea that it may not even be software development we're talking about. It's like architecture, business process. Like these are all related themes that again we have to think about in that broader scale. So thank you for your comment. Anyone else got any questions? John?
Yeah, actually, it was kind of a tag team for both Stephen and Dave. Yeah. So one is, I love what you're doing with the having students and the intern open source thing. For a while I was an engineering manager at Mozilla in San Francisco, and so this is one of our ways to recruit. It was a team was a particularly tricky team to work on operation stuff. But we had a lot of open source code, and we coordinated with the local, with the university that somebody happened to know the person who was a computer science prof. It happened to be in Ottawa as the university, and they changed one of their modules to be that if you worked on this open source fixes, it would count towards your credits. And so I'm saying this out loud as a way, if anyone here knows a computer science prof anywhere, wherever you live, this is your starting path. Here's your to-do item. And the other thing we did was we made a point of flagging as we went through our internal bug triage about different things. We flagged things as easy. And that's what was always on the list for either new hires or these students. And they became interns. And with that, I think it was you who said that we'd have hired this person except they're going back.
Yeah.
I had that multiple times, and my deal with the person who was going back was, I want to hire you, I also want you to graduate.
Right.
That's important. So here is a part-time, no more than 5 hours a week contract work. We're delighted, they get some money.
Very nice.
And by the way, here is a post-dated offer letter for when you do graduate, assuming you make your grades.
Yeah, very nice.
And we had someone who knew to come down. And they stayed and they spread the word. The first year we did this with 2 people. The second year we had 30. And the third year it was well over 100. We just couldn't keep track of it all. So I just want to flag that it took just it's something you can do. And it worked really, really well. And it doesn't just apply to college students. It also applies to people who are transitioning careers with some senior, older, gray hairs. Do that too.
So we ran it's still running. We kicked off a program with COVID, which was very similar because obviously people in retail, aviation, the entertainment industry lost their jobs, and Clare and others were mentors on a program called Future in Tech. It's still there, it still runs. futureintech.ie is the website. So we asked the industry what they wanted, and they indicated 8 pillars of learning, and it included cloud, cyber, data analytics, even digital marketing. And we, working with the Irish government, the Department of Social Protection, which they see the entity that looks after unemployed people in Ireland. So they highlighted it, and we've over 1,500 people have graduated, but all the pathways are industry certification. All the pathways have mentors who have the domain expertise on that pathway, and they meet the students every 2 weeks for about an hour and a half in pods of 4 to 6. And we've had people who had worked in retail are now junior cyber analysts for well-known companies where their salary expectations gone from mid €25,000 up to double, if not more of that. So again, there are plenty of models. There's some fantastic global examples of it that we can all leverage. The fundamental educational model needs to change. Like industry is saying, a 4-year undergrad, by the time they come out, he or she, or everything has moved so fast. So we actually need more agile systems to feed the talent requirement we have. And maybe just to your own point, the biggest challenge engagement we've had with industry over the last 3 years is industry looking for us to support the incremental increase of somewhere around about 5 to 7% of competencies of their existing employees to react to the new requirements, because it's so difficult and so expensive to hire. And when, as we were recently at full employment in Ireland, even though it's 4%, the marketplace is so tight. So working internally to close those competency gaps, embracing the new technologies and putting schemes and frameworks in place to do that is definitely the way forward.
Can I make a quick comment?
No, actually, because we're running into time and I want to get more.
I'll talk to him over coffee.
But I will say, yes, please do. And I will say that just in general, I do think that there is a gap in terms of identifying these kinds of patterns. So my observation is we've got loads of people trying out things, but we haven't got a centralized place to share our learnings back. So I just want to make that point. That would be an action from here. But Denise?
Which is why you need a national...
Would you introduce yourself as well?
Oh, sorry, Denise Cooper. Which is why you need a national OSPO. You need a clearinghouse that actually allows people to ask questions. You and I know that there are OSPO stuff happening in academia now, but there are individual masters and PhD candidates who have really big questions about legal aspects of what's happening with their code, and their university can't help them, that their OSPO can't help them. We need to find a better way to do this. But I was going to say, we used to do the same thing that you did, as you know, because Mitchell and I were pals, about ramping. And my presentation talks about Mozilla's ramp because it was legendary. But the piece that was missing, when I was CTO of Wikipedia, I had kids who were in college. We gave them a bonus if they stayed. We gave them money if they stayed in college through the end, and then also the offer and the whole thing. But I was arguing with their PhD candidates or their master's candidates about whether or not working on the 4th largest website in the world was more significant than whatever stupid little contract the university had for their students to prove that they could code. And that's another thing that Ireland could really fix, because it's a small country with a lot of colleges that talk to each other. Liro by itself could fix that. And it would go a long way.
Thanks, Denise. And just to say, Denise has a talk in the how to contribute to code later on, so you can hear more about all of that then. And for those of you who don't know, the OSPOs are open source program offices, and we haven't touched really on those, but the whole idea is that it's about trying to institutionalize these things at a bigger level than individual contributors. So it's just adding to that effort. Would you like to ask?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Ben. I work here in Trinity on a coding education project. I'd be interested to hear the panel's thoughts on motivations that, let's say, students or maybe job seekers have. Like, we've heard here about the soft skills, but also that the technical skills are still important. What are people finding about the motivations of people to learn those technical skills? Are people saying, oh, well, I don't need to bother with that, the AI will just do that part of my job for me? If you think that that's an unhelpful attitude for people to have, how do you persuade them of the benefits of developing some technical know-how and skills, maybe even starting from primary school up to master's level, or pick somewhere in there beyond into the job-seeking population? Just, interested in your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Okay, so I won't go back to primary school,
Okay.
that'll start a whole other conversation. But I will ask what people are thinking about in terms of that motivation. So where are people feeling? Like, how are they feeling about their motivation about being software developers at the moment?
You just have to look to the event in the RDS yesterday. Like, there were 300 to 400 secondary school females were invited to it under a kind of a STEM banner. So there is a lot of good activity going on. Because if you go back to the noughties, like the .com.bomb crash, like the Mothers of Ireland says, son, daughter, you're going into accountancy, you're going into law, you're going into business, don't go near technology, stay away from that. So we're still on a journey to correct that, and there's an awful lot of actually good work going on. Where we're struggling here in Ireland is the implementation of technology into secondary schools, as I recognise. Now it's there. It's like everywhere. It's like an Lego set. You buy Duplo, or you actually give them a 3 to 5 set. Like, where's the starting point for the individuals? There is a lot of good stuff going on, but we're only touching it. In all honesty, in relation to the motivation, I think the personalities are changing dramatically in the society we live in. So a lot of work to be done there as well.
Thanks, Dave. Daniel, what are you thinking in terms of your experiences?
I was going to give a kind of a cop-out non-answer, to be honest with you.
That works.
The motivations differ by individual intensely. I'm kind of a freak. Nobody claps their hands when you flush the toilet and the water comes back. Nobody is happy when you flip the switch and the light comes on. But I love that kind of behind-the-scenes infrastructure work. So what I tend to advise anybody in a position able to do this is, work with someone to discern what they're interested in, and then if you can help, nurture that, and then go up talking about open source, talking about any mid to large size company. Those roles exist, whatever that role is, they exist, and maybe you're not an infrastructure weirdo like I am, but perhaps you're a fantastic designer. We can help make those connections. So this is, me putting my mentorship hat on much more so than software engineering.
I just want to add into that as well, because one of the first things I learned about the open source community was about the whole ability to scratch your own itch, and I suppose that's what that allows people to actually find their own motivation. I'm a non-techie, I got such a buzz out of doing my first PR and having it merged, and it was like such a dopamine hit. I also think that this is a pathway to get more people into technology that are not technologists. And so for me, there's something there that also, there's been studies shown as well that the kind of social impact idea around open source, the fact that people can work on things that are bigger than themselves, not just a hello world, but something that makes a difference, can actually bring a whole different cohort in as well and motivate people. So I'll just add that to the mix. But maybe do you want to come back in?
Sorry, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts,
Yeah.
sir. But if I could just maybe clarify the question.
Oh,
This is great about
more.
motivation for getting into technology in general. Certainly,
Yeah.
Thank you. I was about motivating for getting into the actual business of writing code.
Okay.
If that's still a skill that's useful, is that a skill that's still useful? I think probably, given what we're doing. And if so, how do you persuade people of that fact? That
Thank you, clarification.
my
That's
question
very good.
Yeah.
We took it too broad. Go ahead.
So the scary thing for me is the most interesting recent observation. The professor I've worked with the most on the internship, he teaches the third year software engineering 101 course. This is the first year, last fall, that he and I were talking. He said office hours are getting weird because it's the first year that the students arriving in his office hours have had access to ChatGPT their entire academic career. And they don't know how to reason in code, some of them. So we're now caught in this horrible place. You see, any of us can recognize that the model gave you slop for whatever reason. Maybe it was awkwardly worded, maybe it read like a press release. It doesn't matter. You recognized it because you have a facility in the language, and so you immediately, you have that gut reaction to it. I work at Microsoft. I am surrounded by people who want to put a Copilot shine on everything. and the thing you often hear is, this is the worst the model's ever going to be, and we don't write assembler anymore. But the reality was, as we moved from assembler to a third generation language to add objects and the rest of it, and as we moved through those steps, we always had a language facility. And the one thing that humans do that models don't do is we have that ability to apply what we've learned in that translation. So as people that write code, we know that when we can read what the machine gave us and go, that ain't it. If you take the time. We've seen the catastrophe of Moltbook in the last week, where a perfectly competent person happened to vibe code something into existence and released it, and is now has compromised the entire AI community. But we're in that space right now. There isn't a clean answer for you to say this is what we do, because we're now in the middle of it. We're earning our way in.
Thank you, Stephen. So I'm afraid we're going to have to actually quit there now, because we actually leave a 5-minute gap between each session. So we need to be able to give people time to change the rooms. I want to thank all our panelists for their great contributions today. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, let's be honest, we could have gone on for another hour of this at least. But I do think that having conversations to learn about best practices, learn about the questions we need to answer now moving forward, to learn about the scope, to even half cover the scope of what we should be talking about. Well, we will just have to continue the conversation later, I guess. But thank you all so much for your contributions. Bonus at the beginning, go ahead, do it.
So, quick, I'm going to steal a line out of your book. Quick show of hands, audience, who here appreciates and loves open source? So how do we close the skills gap? It starts with you. Every last one of you guys. You have something that you know about, you have a passion, take it to other people. The entire history of open source has been paved by people being activists. So yes, talk, but pick up the hammer and go do.
Clare needs help next year.
You can give a talk at your company. You can participate in an internship program. You can open a pull request. And if you can't do any of those things, ping some of us, and we'll be happy to come talk at your company.
We need first
Absolutely.
easy issues on how to do the skill gap.
That's community building 101.
Yeah.
We talk about that all the time in the ASL. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for that, Daniel. That's a good call. Looking for help next year. And thank you, everyone. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all.